Words can be far deadlier than swords, right? Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolute climax of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, Act III. It's honestly a masterclass in political maneuvering, betrayal, and mass persuasion. Here's a quick roadmap of what we're covering. We'll look at the ignored warnings, the assassination itself, Antony's secret vow, Brutus trying to defend the murder, and finally, Antony's masterful manipulation of the crowd. Let's see how Rome's power dynamics flip in the blink of an eye.
All right, starting with those ignored warnings and Caesar's fatal arrogance. We begin right outside the Capitol, and Caesar's immense pride makes him completely blind to a couple of massive red flags. The sheer arrogance on display here is just astounding. The soothsayer had already warned him to beware the Ides of March. Well, the day finally arrives, and Caesar arrogantly taunts him, saying, "The Ides of March are come." But the soothsayer just calmly replies, "A Caesar, but not gone." Caesar is literally mocking the guy trying to warn him, completely oblivious to the fact that danger doesn't just expire because the calendar flipped. And the warnings don't stop there. Artemidorus practically begs Caesar to read a letter that literally contains the exact names of the conspirators, but Caesar just waves him off. He declares that whatever touches him personally has to be served last. It's his tragic flaw in action. Trying to project this image of an untouchable, selfless leader completely seals his doom.
So, moving into the assassination itself, the trap is sprung. Inside the Senate, the conspirators execute this incredibly coordinated plan right in front of Caesar. It's so methodical. First, Trebonius distracts Mark Antony, getting Caesar's most loyal friend entirely out of the room. Then, Metellus Cimber bows low to beg for his brother's pardon. It's a brilliant ruse, really, because it lets the conspirators crowd around Caesar without looking suspicious. And then, once he's isolated and surrounded, Casca strikes the first blow. But right before that first strike, we see Caesar's final moment of absolute hubris. He flat out refuses to reverse the banishment, comparing his authority to the immovable Northern Star. Instead of showing a little mercy, his refusal to bend gives the conspirators the exact justification they need, and their literal cue to attack. Then Brutus delivers his blow, and you get that devastating realization. At 2, Brute, then falls Caesar. It really shows Caesar just giving up his will to live the exact second he realizes his best friend is plunging a dagger into him. He falls right at the base of Pompey's statue. Which brings us to Antony's secret vow and his highly calculated deception. Caesar is dead. The conspirators are literally bathing their hands in his blood to frame it as a sacrifice for freedom, and in walks Mark Antony. He's suddenly playing a very, very dangerous game of survival.
Picture this. Antony shakes the bloody hands of each conspirator one by one. He masterfully masks his overwhelming rage, making them think he's totally on board with their new political order. He just asks for one thing, to speak at Caesar's funeral. Brutus agrees, but Cassius is sharp, and he rightly suspects it's a massive trap.
And Cassius was absolutely right. The second Antony is left alone with Caesar's corpse, the mask drops completely. He promises to cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war, basically prophesying a brutal apocalyptic civil war across Italy where destruction is going to become the terrifying new normal. Now let's look at Brutus defending the murder with cold logic. The scene shifts to the public platform, where Brutus has to somehow convince a furious, panicked Roman crowd that killing Caesar was absolutely necessary. Notice the stark contrast in their strategies here. Brutus takes a highly logical approach. He appeals directly to the crowd's sense of honor, freedom, and patriotism. Antony, on the flip side, is going to be highly emotional, heavily sarcastic, and rely on intense psychological manipulation. Brutus brings cold logic to a crowd that Antony is about to set completely on fire. Brutus really anchors his whole argument on one powerful idea. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. He asked them a pretty stark, logical question. Would you rather have Caesar alive and die as slaves, or have Caesar dead and live as freemen? And amazingly, Brutus's logic actually works. The crowd is literally ready to build a statue of him. Satisfied, he makes a huge mistake and leaves Antony alone with them, which begs the question, how on earth does Antony flip this exact same crowd completely against the conspirators in just a matter of minutes? Let's dive into the greatest rhetorical turnaround in literature. So let's break down Antony's masterful manipulation. Bound by Brutus's strict rule that he can't directly blame the conspirators, Antony uses a weapon way sharper than a dagger: psychological persuasion. He deploys some very specific rhetorical tactics to slowly, almost invisibly, infect the crowd's mind with doubt and unbridled rage. He weaponizes sarcasm, lays out hard evidence, and tantalizes them with a sealed document. Just listen to the sheer power of repetition here. By repeating for Brutus is an honorable man over and over again, while presenting facts that prove the exact opposite, Antony brilliantly turns the word honorable into this venomous, mocking insult. He's technically obeying Brutus's rules, but he's weaponizing their own supposed virtue right back at them. He systematically tears down Brutus's core argument that Caesar was too ambitious. And he does it by just laying out a timeline of facts. Years ago, Caesar brought captive wealth to enrich Rome. Whenever the poor cried, Caesar wept right alongside them. And just yesterday, at the festival of Lupercal, Antony offered him the crown 3 times, and he refused it 3 times. Antony just lays out the facts and lets the crowd defeat Brutus's narrative all by themselves. And then, the grand finale. Antony holds up a parchment with Caesar's seal on it, his last will and testament, but he flat out refuses to read it. He tells the crowd that if they hear how much Caesar truly loved them, they'll go absolutely mad. They'll want to dip their napkins in his sacred blood. It is peak psychological manipulation. By constantly refusing to read the document and telling them it's for their own good, he makes the crowd completely desperate to hear it. He forces them to demand the exact information that will trigger their outrage. Ultimately, when Antony reveals that Caesar left every Roman citizen money and public parks, the crowd just erupts into a violent frenzy. Think about that for a second. If an angry, terrified crowd can be completely flipped from supporting a leader to rioting against them using just a few minutes of carefully crafted words, how vulnerable are we to the power of persuasion today? Because the tools of manipulation, they really haven't changed a bit since ancient Rome.